Marlon Humphrey sent a fiery message to the Ravens secondary and might have taken some shots at a former and current Ravens defensive back in the process as he got into why the Ravens defense has turned a corner. We talk about that, the media doubting John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson, and where this team stands currently, and so much more coming up next on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin IceShaker of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here today, making Locked On Ravens both a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available for you on all podcasts and platforms, where we got you covered in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, also in audio form, where you can follow along and subscribe over there as well for 5 days a week, plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Here with me today, you might know him as the voice of the Baltimore Ravens, or from Fox 45, 105.7, or many of the other ventures he's had over the course of his long and illustrious career. It is Bruce Cunningham. Bruce, I'm really excited to have you on. And look, wish we were talking under better circumstances after a Ravens win, but unfortunately we can't have all the good come out here. This is still an 8-5 football team, but really glad to have you back.
Yeah, you're right. And man, I wish I had your energy. I did at one time, but I don't anymore. You know, I did Bob Haney's show today with Vinny, and I listened very closely to everything Vinny had to say, and he made so many good points. You know, Tucker, he's convinced that it's between his ears. You know, the kicks are long enough. I was thinking maybe it was the snap or the hold. I don't know. He's just too good to be missing that much, you know? Yeah. And I saw a stat today. He's missed 21 points or something like, anyway, whatever number, 27 points, I think it is. The Ravens are from being undefeated. His missed kicks accounted for every one of those points. So he's got to be feeling it. And what do? Do you see a psychologist? I don't know, but it's a good thing it's the bye week, because they've got to figure this out. They're not going anywhere without Justin Tucker. And then the other point that Vinny made, as far as the Eagles game, and by the way, the point that a lot of people are missing here is that the Eagles are really good. You know, I mean, they're really good. Lamar held on to the ball too long. Vinny said that was a chronic thing throughout the game, so I went back and looked at some of it, and he's right. Lamar held on to the ball way too often, and I think that contributed to it too. But if Tucker doesn't miss the field goals, then they win the game. So, you know, what do you take away from that? I'm not real sure. I'm glad it's a bye week, because a lot of things need to sink in for all of us, especially the guys in uniform out in Owings Mills. This is a pretty serious bye week, and it's going to be interesting to see how they come out of this, because their stretch run isn't hard at all. I mean, they could easily sweep that stretch. I won't say easily. There's nothing easy in the NFL, but they can sweep that stretch run. They could, and they'd be right back in there. So I don't know. Like I said, this bye week to decompress for all of us, Kevin, I think is coming in real handy.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point, Bruce, because, you know, when we talk about bye weeks, when the schedule first comes out, we look at a week 14 bye week and we're like, man, that's so late in the season. There's not going to be any rest. But now
I said the same thing. I go ahead. Yep.
We're kind of looking at it now and we're like, hold on, this might actually be the best thing that could happen to this team at this point as a reset point for the final stretch run of the season, which you're right, Bruce. I mean, you got the Giants, the Browns, the Texans, the Steelers, like not hard teams by any stretch of the imagination. Obviously, Pittsburgh.
Well, the Steelers are the hardest one there, but I mean, it's doable. I mean, a 4-game sweep is very doable.
Yeah, and then you look at what Pittsburgh's schedule is, and they have to play Kansas City on Christmas, and they have to, you know, that Ravens matchup. So they have a decently tough road ahead. Sure. The North is not out of the question for the Ravens, but they are going to have to play some better football. But Bruce, something I was really impressed with, at least from the Eagles game, and I know we talked about this both on Friday and yesterday, it was the defense. The defense has put together a really good stretch of games. And unfortunately, the Ravens have lost 2 of those games. Like they've lost 2 or 3. But a lot of it, I think, has been a mindset shift. And Marlon Humphrey talked about it after the game and talked about how, okay, what's going on and why is it this way? Why is it shifted? And he said, essentially what happened was the message became, if you want to play ball, then we'll get you out there. But if you don't, you're going to have to sit on the sidelines. And everyone kind of took that as, whoa. Like, is Marlon talking about Marcus Williams there? Is he talking about Eddie Jackson? Like, what's going on?
We haven't seen Marcus Williams, have we? They're paying him a lot of money. And I'll tell you, he has yet to live up to that contract. But this year, it seemed like he was actually causing a problem. The last 3 games when the defenses look better is because he's not involved. I hate to say that, but that's really what it comes down to. I don't know what's going on with that guy, whether he's got snakes in the head or whatever, but him being on the sideline is working for them. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised to see him inactive during 1 or 2 of these games in this stretch run. He's just out of the picture.
Yeah, I think that's what we're going to see probably is kind of that trend continue from Marcus Williams, where the results are there. Darius Washington has played very well in his place. I mean, you play who plays well and who wants to be out there and who's contributing. And there was the distraction early in the year with Marcus where he was active for the game but didn't play, and everyone's wondering, well, what's going on with Marcus here? Eddie Jackson clearly unhappy with playing time. He's now out of the building after a pretty rough stint with Baltimore. So I think essentially the Ravens and the players, the coaches, front office have kind of weeded through everybody and said, hey, who wants to play and who doesn't? If you want to play, we're going to put you out there. If you don't, well, we have a spot on the bench, or you're going to be looking for another job out there. And that's essentially what has to happen here because it was not working, and now it is.
And they're finding guys. That guy Board had a great game the other night. He really did. That's fine. Get the ones out there that want to play because your season's right there on the line now. You got 5 losses. There's not a whole lot of margin for error left. And it's going to come down to, who's going to go out there and give the effort that's required. I think we can all agree that last year was the Ravens Super Bowl team. That was the team that was built to win, to, lift the Lombardi Trophy. This year's team isn't as good. But in some ways, this team is better because the running game's so much better, Roquan, I was glad to see him bounce back because he had been struggling earlier. They didn't seem to have him covering so many deep passes across the middle, He was looking real bad at that earlier this season. So I think they made the adjustment. And let's be honest, Zach Orr might be finally figuring all this out. That was a hell of a thing for him to take on. And let's be honest, as much as I like Zach Orr, and when he was a player, you couldn't ask for a better guy. Everybody loved Zach Orr. And then when he had to retire, everybody felt sad. But he was no more than their 4th choice, maybe 3rd choice, for that D coordinator. It's just other guys went elsewhere. So he's kind of thrust in there, and it took him a little while. But if you remember 2 years ago, it took Mike McDonald a while. It's taken Zach Orr longer, but I think eventually the lights come on. It looks like that defense is starting to heat up right now. And like I said earlier, it couldn't have happened at a better time. I'm really starting to feel enthusiastic about this defense. I really am. The other thing that nobody talked about, and I had a chance on the radio with Vinny and didn't even bring it up, how in the world did the Eagles take the Ravens receivers out of the game? Did you notice how often Lamar did not throw to receivers? He was throwing to tight ends. He was throwing to guys coming out of the backfield. The Eagles really did a job on those Ravens receivers, and nobody's talking about it.
Yeah, they have a couple of really good rookies over there, and Kenyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, and they didn't even have Darius Slay. He was out with a concussion, and they were still taken. I know Rashad Bateman went down, Bruce, and there's now all this drama about Deontay Johnson because he got no snaps, and Nelson Aguilar, Tylen Wallace. But I'm curious because, look, you've been around a ton of Ravens teams and a lot of leadership on those teams, the Ray Lewis days and Ed Reed and all of that, and it just feels so – it feels so weird to see all of this. I don't want to call it dysfunction, but there's been drama this year between Deontay Johnson, Marcus Williams, Eddie Jackson. Zay's put out stuff on social media this year. It feels like that never happens with this organization. I mean, leadership-wise, I think Marlon's taken on a bigger role in this year. Lamar, obviously, Roquan has his thing. But, do you think there's something where, you, Bruce, being around these Ravens teams and seeing how players, coaches, they didn't let stuff like this happen. That would not fly in locker rooms of the best.
Those teams all had Ray Lewis too, and Ray's the most natural leader that ever lived. And after he left, I'm trying to, Suggs kind of took a leadership role. There's still veterans around. This team, I'm not going to say it's young, but this team is not like you got the grizzled veteran in there that are holding everybody together. I'm encouraged to see that Marlon Humphrey is willing to take on that role. He came out when they were struggling. Remember the little brother comments and all of that?
Yeah.
So he kind of became the point man at that stage. Now that they're playing better, he's more willing to talk about it and say why they're playing better. And that it tells me that he's developing leadership. And if he's a leader inside that room, they can only get better because really their corners are young. Was it you that said to me on the air, was it just last spring that we were talking about how the secondary was going to be a strength?
Yeah.
It's just funny in the NFL how quickly things can change. But they're playing better. Let's hope the trend continues because you got 4 winnable games here. I don't know what happens to them once they get in the playoffs. I don't know if they're a deep playoff team or not, but at least get in there. Give us something to think about going into next year. Right.
Yeah. It's a whole new season. Once January rolls around, you get into the playoffs, and there are certain matchups I think Baltimore would love to see. Maybe certain matchups they wouldn't, but of course we got a long way to go, Bruce. Still 4 games left. And I think there are plenty of opportunities for Baltimore to right the ship in a lot of different ways, but there are still questions about this team. And coming up, we will talk about some of those, what people are saying, and talk about Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh and what that tandem can do moving forward. Stay tuned. A lot to get to on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about the gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. Sometimes you can have bad experiences with other providers, like complicated bills, fees, upcharges, and more. How great is it that Mint Mobile is straight up? Say goodbye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower, above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. And the show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You can pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to up to 100 times your cash. Earn a game all season long on PrizePicks. I love going on PrizePicks, seeing everything they have to offer. There's so much over there. And you can out up to 100 times the money on PrizePicks. Will as little as 4 correct picks. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks is the best way to win real money this football season. What spreads are going off? Which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds. Turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. Thanksgiving free square. Tyreek Hill only needs to receive 0.5 a receiving yard for the rejection to hit. If you're correct on at least one more stat projection, you can win real cash. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. We're back on our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin IceShaker still here with Bruce Cunningham. And Bruce, there's been a lot of conversation about John Harbaugh over the last few years. Obviously, him and Lamar becoming a tandem together back in 2018 and really have had a lot of success playoff-wise, necessarily maybe not so much. Regular season, they've been dominant all across the board. And I want to read you some comments here, and I want to get your reaction to these. I think there's a bigger conversation that comes out of this. So Hembo over on ESPN talked about John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson as a tandem. And he said, quote, they're just not a great problem-solving tandem. They don't do a good enough job at adjusting drive to drive as Mike Tomlin, Matt LaFleur, Sean McVay, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. Bruce, there's been a lot of conversation about all of the adjustments that have to be made over the course of the game. And nobody's perfect at it. John Harbaugh struggles sometimes with time management and adjustments, this, that, and the other. But do you feel like he and Lamar Jackson don't make up a problem-solving tandem, or do you feel like they do a good job?
That quote, first of all, that you read me, that's very fair. That's a very fair assessment. Here's the problem. Lamar's not a typical quarterback. A Lamar game plan is going to involve a lot of, play extending and roll. And, you know how Lamar plays. it's kind of harder to get locked into a certain way of doing things late in games or whatever when your quarterback plays the way he does. When he has his success, it's because he's scrambled enough to find an open receiver downfield. And I think that makes it a little harder probably to go to war with him, because you have less of an idea of what to expect every time the ball is snapped. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because Lamar can do things that nobody else can do, but I think you got to factor that in. Does that make sense?
I mean, and we talked about it on the radio. It's essentially some of the things that makes Lamar such a good player is the fact that he is so good with his arm and so good with his legs. And I feel like over the course of his career, Lamar's been vilified for his rushing ability, when in reality, that's what makes him so good. It's not just, if you let him sit back in the pocket, he will slice and dice you apart. He will make sure that he finds those spots. But when Lamar doesn't take those rushing lanes, and he said his mom cussed him out for it and said, hey, you need to do a better job at that now. Well, if you don't do that, you are taking away an aspect of your game. You are letting the defense off of the hook.
Right.
And so for John Harbaugh, for Lamar Jackson, it's a matter of adjustments, but it also, I think, Todd Monken in this conversation, Bruce, where it just feels like at times they'll either start really fast like we saw against the Eagles, and then they'll kind of fizzle out throughout the rest of the game, or they'll start really slow. And then they'll turn on the Jets, and either they'll have enough juice to come back or they won't.
Let's just see if this defense can continue to improve and to play the way it's been playing the last few games. If they step up, if they're really playing as well, in fact, over the last 3 games, they lead the NFL in pass yardage. The Ravens secondary, seriously, over the last 3 games, they are number 1 in the NFL. If they continue to play that way, then I think everything's going to be fine, but you just have no way of predicting that. You just really don't. And, when we look back on this 2024 team, we're going to look back, I think, with a lot of disappointment, what might have been. Not the disappointment that 2023 brought us, but I just think most people expected a little bit more, and this team is flawed. It really is. And then that brings us back to Tucker. This is serious. And there's nothing they can do. Vinny said yesterday, he said, really the only move they have is to sign a kicker to the practice squad, Yeah. But the problem is Tucker is perfect in practice. He's pre-game, all of that. Everything's perfect. Gets in the game and boom, boom. Nobody can really figure it out. You might do well to bring another leg in and stick him on a practice squad just in case, because frankly, Tucker or no Tucker, and he's probably, in my 33 years here, he's probably one of the 3 most beloved athletes in Baltimore, over the time that I've been here. But if he's lost it, they need to find a graceful way to let this thing in, because as you get to this point in the season and then into the playoffs, you can't be missing field goals. You just can't. And an organization has to look at a player the way a farmer looks at a cow. If that cow is not producing, for me, then that cow's ended up on somebody's plate. And that's kind of the way the NFL is too. Justin and I are friends. He's one of the better friends I ever had on the Ravens, and I love the guy. But you can't keep missing field goals. And if you do, they've got to take action. They can't be wishy-washy about this. They're in the stretch run now, and they've got to be decisive. What another guy might do is from 50 on in, give you a little bit higher level of confidence. Because right now, nobody's got confidence in Justin Tucker, and leading that pack is Justin Tucker himself. He has no confidence whatsoever, and it shows. And they show those reaction shots of him on TV after he misses, and he just looks haunted. Did you notice that in Sunday's game? Just he looks haunted, and you feel for the guy. But it's a cruel, cruel business. And remember my analogy about the farmer and the cow, because that could come into play.
It's difficult to kind of see this fall from grace because, Bruce, you could go and whether it was from 55, 45, 65, you could go watch Tucker trot out on the field, go get your groceries from the car, come back in, and the Ravens would have 3 points. Didn't matter where on the field it was. Yep. But now it just feels like even on the extra points, you kind of, you're watching the ball and you're kind of leaning with it to see if it's going to go in or not. And, he doinks it off the upright. And then you can see the overcorrections happening too, because he's missing all these to the left. And then on the last one, he tries to hook it more right. And it just goes far.
He actually had a bodily reaction to that one. He kind of went like this or something. He doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't get it either. It's kind of sad when something that was so automatic to you, when you have to start thinking about it, It's kind of why so few great athletes become great coaches, because they're great athletes and they never really have to, work at it the way some other people do. And I'm kind of stretching the analogy, but I think you know what I mean there. They better hope he can get right. They better hope he can get right, because nobody they're going to bring in is as good as he is. But if he's missing everything, realistically, how good is he? That's the question that has to be asked.
And essentially, how long of a runway do you give him moving forward? If this is
you got 4 games left, I don't know that there's any runway left at all. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised. John dismissed the players. I think they're due back in Saturday. But I can guarantee you, while the players are out, they've got kickers working out. I guarantee you they're looking at kickers right now, because you have to. You just, again, you're in December now. You don't miss field goals in December. You just don't. And if you got a guy missing field goals, well, then you got a move to make. Other than him, I'm pretty bullish about the rest of the roster. I'm really happy with the way the offense is played, even though Philadelphia just mashed them. But again, people I don't think appreciate just how good Philadelphia is. The Lions had another starter go down on defense, at Rodriguez, the linebacker. I don't know if the Lions can absorb both of those losses now on defense. I think people would be wise to keep an eye on the Eagles, because what I saw Sunday, I saw a team that can go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I knew they were good, but I hadn't really sat down and watched them play a whole game, and I was impressed as hell. That's a very good football team they have up there.
And they were doing that without Devontae Smith, without Darius Slay. I mean, they had a couple of big stars injured, and I think obviously, Bruce, the final score tells you it was a little closer than it was in terms of the garbage time touchdown. But you look at the stats, and the Ravens kind of dominated in most aspects of the game, but they just couldn't convert on their opportunities.
7 points is what Tucker cost you. 7 points. Add 7 points to that final score. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
And again, it pains me, because I love Justin Tucker. I really do. But damn, you got to make field goals in December. I hate that it's come to this, and the other thing that's always comes up is he's 35 years old now. And I'm the last guy to bring up somebody's age, but I mean, you got to factor that in too. It's difficult times ahead for him. I hope he gets it straight, because I know nobody ever had more fun wearing that purple jersey than Justin Tucker.
It's been such a ride, but as you talked about, Bruce, this is a what have you done for me now lately league, and this season 10 missed kicks for Justin Tucker, almost below 70% field goal percentage. It's been a rough ride overall, and I think that changes how you do things even offensively, which can be a problem.
It does. I mean, you can't be reliant on your field goal team right now. You don't have it if you're the Ravens. You got to be thinking touchdowns. You got to be thinking touchdowns, because you just can't depend on the alternative. And I hate that they're in this position, but I think all of us would be wise to stop fooling ourselves and realize that this is exactly where they are right now. This is a crisis point for this club, and the way they handle this is really going to determine, I think, the way the rest of the season goes.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge part.
I have faith in Eric. I have faith in John. They know what they're doing. They're gonna try to make the best move possible, but there is a move to be made. I think they're gonna find it.
Yeah, and they're gonna have to look at something, because if Justin Tucker costs you a game in the playoffs and that's the way it goes, that conversation becomes a lot louder and a lot worse if you didn't try to do anything.
And his age starts to come up a lot more too. At that point,
Yeah, it's rough all around. And again, for someone who has meant so much to the organization, to the city of Baltimore, it's a really rough fall to watch with your own eyes. But I think it's crazy, because with the offense, even when you get into that area or in that field goal tucks area, it's like you have to change your mindset and shift kind of where you're going, because all of a sudden, do you go for it on 4th and 3 from the 35-yard line because you can't trust them? Or do you punt the ball away and try to pin the Eagles back, or whoever you're playing back? Those are conversations this team hasn't had to have in 10 plus years, and now you're having them.
Well, really, to be fair about it, they had Matt Stover, who was outstanding. And they had Billy Cundiff, who, despite that miss in New England, was also outstanding. And then you had Justin Tucker. The Ravens have been spoiled with kickers. They've had outstanding kickers throughout their entire existence. So, they've never had to experience this before. It's always been kind of an afterthought, their entire kicking game. How long was Sam Cook here? Like 14 years or something, Maybe it needs a little bit more attention. Maybe it does. And, I was talking about the early years. I wanted to make sure I mentioned this while I was on with you. They announced the finalists for the Hall of Fame. today. And among the old timers is Maxie Bond. And the reason Raven fans should know Maxie Bond, he was on Ted Marchibroda's original Raven staff. He was Ray Lewis's first position coach in the NFL. And now he's up for the Hall of Fame, as a player. He was a linebacker himself. But the story goes that Maxie had heard some really good things about Ray. And Maxie actually flew down to Miami and spent a couple of days with him. And he came back just raving. And he said the best thing is we could probably get him late in the first round. And they did. I think Ray was like a 24 or 25, I think, in the first round, because Ogden was their high pick. But anyway, Maxie's up for it, and I'm really pulling for him. Plus, he used to live at River Downs at the golf course. And if he knew you, he would let you hit out of his yard. And to me, that's a tremendous human being,
That is awesome. I love that. And hey, the rest is history. The Ravens grab him, and best linebacker, one of the best of all time. Like, you have to give him the flowers for all. Yeah,
we lost him. We lost Maxie a couple of years ago, but I know in Maxie's long career, and he was around forever, I know that Ray, the whole Ray Lewis thing, I think that's what he was proudest of, and rightly so. What a job he did with him.
Yeah, an absolute heck of a job. But there is a lot to dive into with the offense, defense with this team. Bruce, you said you were bullish on the rest of the roster, so I want to get your thoughts on that coming up in the final part of the show, because despite what the offense has done over these last couple of weeks and the inconsistencies, they still have a lot of talent that they can capitalize on. So be sure to stay tuned. We have a lot to get to coming up on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats with live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. So in that Ravens and Eagles game, on the Eagles side of things, if you had Saquon Barkley, the over on the rushing yards there, you're probably living large over on FanDuel because the Ravens couldn't do enough to stop them over the course of the game. Just as a FanDuel.com to join today. You'll start with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every more FanDuel an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We're back here, Locked On Ravens with Bruce Cunningham. I am Kevin Ostreicher, bringing you daily Ravens coverage here on this great edition of the show. And Bruce, I'm telling you, this roster, when the Ravens built it out, there were always going to be some level of weaknesses. Every roster has them. Every team has them. But you have Lamar Jackson. You surround him with the best cast of weapons he's had in his career. Zay Flowers has had a great year. Rashad Bateman has really turned it on and found that chemistry. Derrick Henry's looked great. Justice Hill has been one of the unsung heroes of this offense. It just feels like skill position-wise, the Ravens have so much talent. And yes, they've been inconsistent over the past couple of weeks, and whether they're good in the beginning or bad at the end or whatever it may be, there's still a lot to like, especially with how Lamar's performed this season.
Yeah, there is. There's an awful lot to like. Philadelphia exposed some things, though, the other day. The offensive linemen weren't getting off their initial block and comboing on the linebackers. And the linebackers made all the plays for the Eagles. I think one had 13 tackles and the other one had 10. So that offensive line is still very much a work in progress. I thought the genius move was figuring out that Falele is not a tackle. You put him in there at guard, and all of a sudden he's gargantua, and he's playing a lot better. But they still have room to improve, that O-line. It's still not exactly where it should be. But this should sober everybody. They got to replace Ronnie Stanley after this season. So as you go into the offseason, you start thinking draft. If there's a left tackle available, they just might have to grab one,
Yeah, and here's the situation with the offensive line. I agree. Whether they want to bring back Ronnie on a deal himself, or because I think he's going to get paid this offseason. He took a risk on himself, and I think
he played well. Yeah,
it's paid off for him. I think he'll probably get around.
If I'm the Ravens, I'm not going multi-years with him. I'm just not. The Ravens have seen him up close, and it's not his fault. But when guys get hurt, their value comes down. And I don't know that the Ravens see Ronnie Stanley as part of their future. Maybe part of their present, but I don't know that they see him as part of the future. And that's why I think a left tackle would be hard for them to resist in the draft.
And I think that with the other, I think they found something in Roger Rosengard, and I think he's going to be a staple on that line for a while. We know Tyler Linderbaum is one of the best, if not the best, at his position.
Really good player.
Then you have Patrick McCary, who certainly struggled against Philadelphia. You mentioned Falele, who has improved over the course of the season, and there's still a lot of improvement to go. Yeah, there's a lot of improvement at both guard spots that you could make. But I think that when people talked about, the Ravens are overhauling their offensive line this past offseason, it was always going to be a multi-year rebuild of this.
Yeah, and I also think that the Ravens went into this season with a lot of hope for the offensive line. A lot of hope. You weren't really sure what it was going to be. And then your veteran, much beloved offensive line coach, unfortunately, passes away, right in the middle of it. So, wow, you were scrambling already. And now you got a new position coach coming in. It took them a little while, but they've been playing pretty well as a unit. They really have. But they're not doing the second level stuff. They're not helping the running game by going after the linebackers simply because they're not good enough to get past those D linemen. Those are things that they have to learn. And that's really getting into X and O's football. But that's something that really became apparent. And if the Eagles were successful doing it, that's all they're going to see the rest of the year. Everybody's going to do it,
It's more of those physical fronts. And I know we talked about that a little bit too, where it's like Philly or Pittsburgh or Kansas City. Those are teams that have given the Ravens offensive line fits because they just have super physical players on that line. But then when you get to a Buffalo team that doesn't really have those guys, or you get to a Denver that doesn't really have those guys, the Ravens are able to manhandle them and you go. And I think the thing that we talked about, Bruce, was Lamar Jackson, amazing player. Derrick Henry, amazing player. They can be Superman in so many different ways, but they can't do it all for you.
No. Lamar can't play corner, or maybe he could. I don't know, but they can't. They can't do it all. And Lamar's been holding back. Lamar's been avoiding running. He's trying to stay in the pocket more. And it reminds me of something that Brian Billick told me long after he left the Ravens. We were talking one time about Kyle Bowler. And he said, what our biggest mistake was with Kyle Bowler? He said he had so much to fix that we broke him all the way down and then built him back up. But in the process, he forgot how to play. I'm not saying it's that dramatic with Lamar, but Lamar has such a unique game. If you try to modify that game or change that game or maybe keep him in the pocket more, he's not the most effective Lamar. And so I try to keep that in mind too. You got to find that right mix, and you got to let Lamar be Lamar. You do, because if you do that, he's a generational talent, and we've all seen it. But it's a generational talent is not always easy to coach,
And again, there's nothing that is taking away from him as a passer in these situations.
No.
Lamar is a heck of a passer. He is up there with the best of them. But again,
you got to run it. I won't say half of his game, but at least 40% of his game is his running ability. He's really good at that. He's probably better at that than anybody that's ever played the game as far as quarterback goes. And that's part of his arsenal. And you just can't ignore that arsenal just because you got Derrick Henry back there. I would hope that they will have found the mix on that by now, but they truly haven't. And then what Philadelphia was able to do to them, by that fourth quarter, they just looked lost out there on offense. Lamar's throwing that Zay Flowers pass. That was just pathetic. I had to get up and leave the room for a minute. That one where he threw it right at his feet. Yeah. And then he had Andrews wide open on the right side in the first half, and they even touchdown, Greengrass ahead of him, didn't complete the pass. He overthrew Likely once too. Lamar doesn't normally overthrow people. His passes, they just look kind of lousy the other day, and not good enough to beat a team as good as the Eagles. So I don't know. I'm not worried about Lamar. Lamar's going to be Lamar. I'm worried about other things, but he's not one of them.
Yeah, no, it was uncharacteristic and something that we've not necessarily.
He had a bad day. In fact, that may have been his worst game of the season. If you take a macro look at it and think about all those rotten passes that he threw, and he just wasn't good at all. And the scary thing for the rest of the NFL should be that's the worst he's looked all year, and they still almost won that game. So
they find ways to do that. And look, I think the thing that I will say, or at least the things I will say here is, one, Lamar shouldn't have to be on his A game every single game. And if he's not on, the Ravens lose. That's not what should happen. Sometimes, look, Lamar picks this team up, just like we talked about with Tucker. He's picked this team up for 10 plus years. Now, for Lamar, he shouldn't have to do that every single game. But of course, he does struggle sometimes. And between that and Pittsburgh,
with great talent comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
That can't be avoided. And there are times where Lamar is going to have to lift the team up and take him to victory. But it's because of what he's been blessed with. not everybody can do what Lamar does. Nobody can do what Lamar does. But like I said, with that comes some responsibility. And I think he gets that. And I tell you something else I've noticed about Lamar that's encouraging to me. He's a lot more comfortable in interviews now. He's more comfortable up there with the cameras rolling and talking. He's starting to have a little bit more confidence in it. He's starting to express himself a little better. And frankly, that's what a leader and a quarterback has to do. You got to be the front man. And he's growing into that role. And it's going to be interesting to see where he goes with that.
Yeah, and I think Lamar's a leader. It's been incredible to watch that transformation. So, look, he's a great player. He's a great leader. And I think for the Ravens moving forward, they need him. And they need this roster to get it together and just be a little more consistent overall. But Bruce, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for hopping on, joining me. Please shout out anything you want to here. It's always a pleasure having you.
And I appreciate you. You always being available to me too. I'll be on this Saturday, noon to 2, 105.7 The Fan. Make sure you listen in. And thanks for having me, Kevin.
Absolutely, Bruce. Always appreciate you. And thank you to everybody who tuned in today. Listen, watch the Locked On Ravens on the way out. Hit that like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along and subscribe in audio form. Coming up tomorrow, more Ravens coverage. So be sure to stay tuned. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.